World War II. Hold on, got somebody. Okay, got it. There we go. Anyway, it was built in 1849 and it was deactivated for a short time, but well, not too short, but between 1941 and 1980 when it was reactivated again. But between that time, it fell into terrible disarray, or and continued to decay, and just sort of it was just left abandoned and just basically suffered from the elements and all kinds of things. But the good news is this wonderful lighthouse that is the second oldest in the state. And like Kelly, they mentioned, is active today. It did thankfully get the attention of the community as it was sitting there, basically deteriorating over time. And the community started a historical society that in 1971 began to come up with a plan to restore the lighthouse and hopefully have it reactivated and open to the public for tours. And here we are some 50 plus years later, and that is exactly what's happened. The Historical Society has seen it through some major restorations, including one that just happened between 2016 and 17, bringing it basically back to its former beauty. And at that point, we furnished it to look as if a keeper and family are living there. It's meant to be a very hands-on museum rather than roped off and, don't touch this or that. It's meant to be come in and you can sit down in the chairs, you can, touch things that are there, experience it just like you would if you were visiting the keeper and his family back in the day. So that's basically what we do now with it. And it, of course, is an active lighthouse since 1980. So basically, it was originally used to guide the many oyster boats that came in and out of the river. At that point, there was a lot of boat building upriver. Many schooners were made built right there along the shores, and it guided basically the captains back home and also back up into the boat yards. It was both shipping and oyster, but mostly oyster boats. So it was beautiful. And there's one on the river still. The beautiful A.J. Meerwald has been fully restored and just sailed by the other day, which was pretty neat to see right off the coast. So it's important historically, second oldest in the state, represents the whole oyster industry, which was a big deal for New Jersey, and of course shipping and boat building and all of that. And it's just a great reminder of that. And it's a hands-on museum where children and people, just anybody on all levels, can just come and experience it firsthand right there. So it's pretty neat. It has historic value, education value, and also tourism value. So, and it's an active lighthouse. So mariners still use it today. So that's basically where we are as far as the importance of it and it's a little bit of its history.
You're just speaking off the top of your head. I have to say, it's amazing how much knowledge, you just have. Very, very impressive. And I know this is a labor of love for you. This is a little bit of a silly question, but it was a topic of hot debate at the New Jersey History and Historic Preservation Conference last week. How do you pronounce the Historical Society's name?
Well, it's spelled, of course, Maurice, but it's pronounced Morris.
Okay.
I'm not original. I've lived here about 20 years and I actually live in Morristown. So I had to practice before I picked up mail the first time at the post office. So little town, you have to pick up your mail. But it is definitely pronounced Morris. And it has been, and you can tell if someone's local or not, whether they pronounce that river. It's the river that the lighthouse is on that marks the mouth of the river is the Morris River. So you can tell whether somebody's local or not by how they pronounce the name of it. So
it's so funny. It's such a small thing, in the midst of talking about all this very important history, but there were historians who felt very strongly about this.
And just so you know where we got that name, the original name of the lighthouse was the Morris River Lighthouse. So that's why it's the Morris River Historical Society. So
okay. Can you drill down a little more on the different players involved in stewarding the lighthouse? Because there's a lot of there's the Historical Society, but there's also government agencies involved. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Okay, well, we'll cover a little bit of the history. Obviously, it was under the federal government when it was active between 1849 and 1941. it was under the Lighthouse Service, United States Lighthouse Service. So, but at that point, when it was deactivated, it sat for a while, and the federal government decided, well, we're probably not going to reactivate this. At that time, that's what they thought. So they were just going to either sell it, or, and that's when the state of New Jersey stepped up and said, oh, no, we'd really like to have not necessarily the lighthouse. They didn't really care. But from what I understand, it was the land, the bayfront property that they were interested in. And shortly thereafter, they did acquire it in 1956. And at that point, they put in shortly thereafter, a boat ramp. So that is how the state of New Jersey became involved. They acquired it from the federal government. And there's some sort of a deed agreement with a lot of restrictions. I'm not quite sure exactly how that all was lined up, because the Coast Guard is actually involved, because in 1980 it was reactivated. So I don't know if it was a plan that they thought maybe someday they would, so they had to leave that door open when they turned it over to the state. Not quite sure how that all worked, but we have the Historical Society has managed it for the past 50 plus years, overseeing the restoration and the care, and that paid all the bills, and everything that there is to do to actually take care of the building and to offer the public. And then the Coast Guard handles the light bulb. The
I was
D-
gonna
yeah,
ask,
the
okay, that
Coast
seems
Guard
like a big
handles-
responsibility for the
yeah,
Historical
they handle
Society.
well, keeping the light bulb on too. So the actual light is still falls under the United States Coast Guard. And we let
Okay.
them know if the light is out, and they come
Okay.
out. So,
Oh,
but the
interesting.
DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection under the state of New Jersey, actually owns the property. So
Okay.
they call all the shots.
Yeah, so this is going to be my last question before I turn things over to our executive director, Kelly, who's ready to take the baton. My last question for you, Nancy, is going to be, are you at liberty to tell us a bit about this lease situation while we're talking about ownership and operations of the site?
Yeah, as far as I know, it's it's public information.
Okay.
Originally and I've read this in the minutes of the meetings from way back in the 70s. The society was formed in 71, but they didn't get the lighthouse right away. Even back then, the state of New Jersey was sort of bucking the idea of restoring the building. And they didn't offer a lease until way into the project. But by 1972, the state of New Jersey, through the DEP, did agree to let the society begin to restore it. The society, however, didn't have any assurances that they would be able to continue to maintain the building or have access to the building, but they decided it was worth it. The building was worth, risking putting their time and money and energy into it, even if they, if the state said, oh, forget it, you can't do it anymore. So thankfully that for the past 50 some years, the Historical Society has had eventually they were offered a long-term lease, and there's been a series of long-term leases since then, which worked fine until just a few years ago when the last long-term lease had expired. And shortly before that, I'd approached the DEP, okay, what do we need to do? I just assumed it would be some sort of paperwork and we would, take care of it. But it's kind of been a nightmare ever since the expiration of that particular long-term lease. For whatever reason, what had been working so well, or relatively well, they didn't want to continue. So it's been a series of, I don't know how else to put it other than excuses. At first it was, oh, we're just behind on our paperwork. Then it was, oh, we don't really offer leases anymore, and they only offered a license. The license was very, the original license was very not workable at all. And thankfully at that point, I know this is a long answer, but it's kind of the complicated part. Finally, with the help of Congressman Van Drew, we were able, who worked as a kind of a moderator with us to make sure that, we were all cooperating and trying to get to a reasonable agreement as far as the management agreement. So thankfully, we did manage to get a temporary license agreement that's gotten us to this point. And then the DEP did promise at that point that they would offer a lease. So here we are. They finally did offer a lease, however, not to just the society. Unfortunately, not like they have done at the other lighthouses or have done in the past. They decided they were going to offer it to the public for whatever reason. They insisted they had to, but that didn't make sense to me because they didn't do it with any of the others, nor had they done that in the past. But they, like I said, they kind of call all the shots. So we applied for the lease, and have been waiting to hear since then. It's May 1st is when we had to apply, and believe it or not, I just heard today unofficially from Congressman Van Drew's office that again, this is very unofficial, but that the society would be, through an LLC that we had to set up underneath the society, would be awarded the lease. So we just have to wait and hear officially, but I don't think, that's kind of where we are now. So that's one big hurdle it sounds like we have behind us, although I'll feel a lot better when I actually get to sign the lease. But anyway, that's kind of where we are with that. Unfortunately, even if we do get it and everything is, it's a very difficult lease to function under. It would be very costly for the lighthouse. And like I said, we already pay all the restoration costs and maintenance and all the cost of opening it to the public and all the insurance and all the electric and everything. So to have extra fees and paperwork and insurances on top of the insurance that we have to pay, it's going to be quite burdensome. But it's it is what it is, and it's the only choice that we have to keep going. So hopefully we'll find a way to function under that lease and that we really do actually get it. That's where we are, as far as I
Thank you, Nancy, for that answer. And I know it is quite complicated when we get into multiple partners and stakeholders who are investing in sites like these. And I might kind of like take us back just a bit with my follow-up question to that. So in 2019, right, the East Point Lighthouse was listed on our 10 most endangered list. And at that time, we know that the site had went through some restoration efforts. Could you just like walk us through what has been done to the site, or what work still needs to be done? Like, what are the current issues that face the lighthouse right now?
Well, here's the good news. We'll do a little good news. The building itself has been an absolute miracle, really, as far as the restoration that's been accomplished on the building itself. First, you had a small historical society in a not, in an area where it's not like people were super wealthy or had a lot of means to do this, but they took what at the time was a completely burned out shell. It had no roof, no cupola, no light. It just wasn't a brick building with, completely exposed to the elements. And they took on that responsibility at their own cost, and with grassroots efforts managed to put the light back, the roof back on, the cupola back on, and by 1980 had the light reactivated. That is just nothing short of miraculous. They did it with spaghetti fundraiser dinners and cupcake sales and, their own labor. And so that part of it really needs to be emphasized, how amazing that was. Then in the late 90s, there were some grants applied. Again, very, big deal. They put a new roof on again, because by then there needed to be a metal roof installed, and put some of the historical details back in, the accurate windows and shutters and a porch on the front. And then the hopes were phase 2 was supposed to be pretty much on the heels, which would have been interior work. But unfortunately, there was a little snag in things where the society had kind of had some struggles within their personal lives, and the grants themselves got a little harder to navigate. So it caused some delays. But by 2016, with the help of the county stepping in to help navigate the grants, which had gotten harder to fulfill the criteria. Basically, we needed engineers and things like that. So the county stepped up, which was wonderful, Cumberland County. So again, it was taken from the inside, had never really had any work done. So it was gone, from no ceilings to really dilapidated plaster walls. And anyway, completely restored and properly with the right paint colors and just really, really, really well done. So the building itself, I mean, we certainly have a list of maintenance things that need to be done. There always is that with an old building. I live in an old home too, so it's I get the drill. But the building itself is in phenomenal shape, really, because of these efforts. And like I said, we need to put some paint on some outside railings and things like that, and the porch needs painting, but pretty much minor things that we can really, take care of relatively quickly. But the big issue as far as the reason it was put on the endangered list is because of the erosion that's been basically left unchecked through the decades, and is till this day only has a Band-Aid, partial Band-Aid. I can't even call it a full Band-Aid fix, with basically nothing but a pretty large, but still only a sandbag protecting it from the bay. So we're like one big storm away from really bad, foundation issues, if it even held. So.
And Nancy, to add to that, could you, talk about or speak to, so right, we know that is the threat, right? When another storm could come and take it out. Has there been discussions with the state or with other partners on methods or sort of responses to this, or is it still sort of a back and forth unanswered uncertainty? I'm sure we'd all like to know.
Yeah, there was a lot of public outcry. I mean, here we are, we've got this beautifully restored building and, this incredible success of the community. And of course, outside help as well. We did have some funding, some wonderful grants. And so we have all of that. That's all wonderful. And then shortly right after that, while we're furnishing the building and bringing in the antiques, literally what was left of the natural dune, after Hurricane Sandy, we lost an enormous amount of the dune. It was basically gone. But anyway, right after we got the building restored and we're all excited and had been rededicated, what was left of the dune breached. And we literally had bay water at the front step of this building. Now we're trying to furnish, so it's a little scary. But at that point, and shortly thereafter, we built this, the community built the sandbag walls and tried to hold it. So we held it for about 2 years until finally the public, it kept disintegrating and, had to be rebuilt. And it said, we need to do something more permanent here. And the state's response, again, after lots of public outcry, was to just put in a geotube, which is like a glorified version of a sandbag wall. They can be very effective if the application is right, but this one is way too close to the water line and way too small and left incomplete. So, and also, even if it was completely done and bigger, it's still only a temporary measure. They don't last that long, and we're reaching towards the end of its expiration date. So, so basically, your question, is there talk about what can be done? And I'll have to say, only amongst ourselves. We're not getting anything from the state. The commissioner of the DEP himself said, you're not going to get help from us. We're not going to do anything else. We have a senator that's trying to get them to do something. But basically nothing. I haven't heard anything about what they actually would do, if they would do anything, other than pretty much that there's no plan. So here we are, once again, trying to make enough noise to get the attention to this place that it so deserves. And just as a contrast to that, the other New Jersey lighthouses that have been threatened by erosion have been given the appropriate, hard structure erosion protection, which is based on whatever that site, would be best. Probably the most similar we'd need a small version of what you see at Cape May Lighthouse with a series of jetties. Much smaller than what they have at Cape May, but same idea, just to preserve the beach and a beach restoration, of course. So anyway.
This is all great. And it's again, very complicated. And of course, with the state being involved, even other additional layers to kind of get to a full project or response to this. But possibly taking it back again a bit with a follow-up question, with all the partners that you've identified and that you've talked about a bit, Can you speak to sort of either the fundraising efforts or like how have these groups come together to preserve this site? So right, it is state owned, but it seems like you have the U.S. Coast Guard is your organization, it's the local community. How, or what is the sort of drive for this site? If you can speak.
The U.S. Coast Guard, they would, the ones that come out and help and actually do the light would love to help. But as far as the U.S. Coast Guard, from what I understand, there really isn't anything that they can do, because their mission is basically just to have a light there, and they could just as easily put a pole with a light on top. And as much as that sounds horrible, that is, they can't stretch their mission statement to include historic preservation, from what I understand. So as much as I, some of them personally would like to be able to do that. So they're kind of in a different category. The Historical Society themselves, of course, doesn't have the means to come up with something so big as a jetty. That wouldn't, that would be definitely miraculous, but that's a lot of spaghetti fundraisers and t-shirt sales. But, it really needs to be an Army Corps project. But even that, we'd have to match the funding, from what I understand. So funding would be a big obstacle, but we've even asked the question at meetings. I personally asked it, if miraculously there was the funding to put in hard structure at East Point Lighthouse, would we be given permission to do that? And the answer I was told was no. So, now whether that would change with all the public pressure, I really don't know, but that was what was said, to me personally at that point. So I don't know. So it isn't just funding, it's more than that.
And currently right now, could you like what type of fundraisers do you have? How could, we have a nice audience this evening, how can we get involved? How can we help? Well,
we there's always the easy, we have the a PayPal, doesn't have to be PayPal, but any credit card. There's a donation button on our website, which is eastpointlight.com. Basically our fundraising right now is just it goes right back into the building for the restoration or the maintenance and all the care that it takes to do that. As far as on top of that, for a project to actually secure the point, I think we would actually need a project before we could have people, giving money towards that. There needs to be permission from, higher than us to allow that to happen. I mean, just to show you how strict it is, we're not allowed to even bring in sand without permission. When we brought in sandbags, we had to have permission. And I literally had to be in tears to get it. I said, there's bay water at the front step. I was like crying on the phone, and the person that was, that I have to report to finally caved and let us put in sandbags. So it's really an approval process that is a big deal. Not that funding isn't also, because that helps us hang in there. Again, the DEP's is making it so hard on us that this monumental task to begin with of maintaining a building of that age on the coast and offering it to the public in interesting ways is monumental, and of course not inexpensive either. But with the added burdens on top of it, with constant paperwork and being distracted, instead of planning events, we're stuck trying to navigate the next hurdle that the DEP's put in front of us. But so one of the things we need more than anything is for people to call the governor and say, look, this place is important. There is nothing they're doing out there that isn't a good thing. And, it should be supported, not hindered. But of course, donations are wonderful too, because we take them and do amazing things with them and offer this amazing place to the public in good shape. So, and maybe we will get to the point where we can get permission to do an actual seawall or jetty or whatever the engineers come up with is the best plan for that particular spot.
I have one more question before I think I'm going to turn over to the audience, but we do have, and Nancy, you might know Richard, he was the engineer, I guess, previously on the East Point Lighthouse, who has some photos he'd like to share with the group. But before Richard, I kind of have the show and tell unexpected, so thank you for that. Nancy, just out of curiosity, there is a bunch of different lighthouses across, New Jersey and the East Coast. Have you been in, or does your organization connect with other lighthouses that might face similar situations? Is there like a network of, restoring lighthouses, or, the sort of a working group, if you will, to talk and discuss challenges?
Yes,
there
yes. Lighthouse community, I'll call it that, because it really is. As I would describe as a very, connected, tight community, supportive of one another. We meet actually quite frequently because we plan the Lighthouse Challenge of New Jersey, and of course that takes meetings to plan, and we all leaders from each lighthouse come together to get that together. And of course, while you're there, I always call it the meeting outside the meeting, after the meeting, a lot of stuff gets done at that point too. What are you doing about this and that? And so we really, and they're very encouraging of one another, which is really exciting and helps a lot. So we do, if someone else has had a similar situation, we learn from each other and support one another with that. Everybody shares the information that they have, and that couldn't be any better either. I mean, the community support and that support is fabulous. So that answers your question, hopefully.
Yeah, no, just interested.
And you can look to see how differently, unfortunately, the Bayshore is treated very differently than the ocean coast. The southern Bayshore away from North Jersey is treated very differently in a negative way. Epsecan got their lease without a hitch.
Well, we are rooting for the lease. Fingers crossed.
I feel like we got it. I can't believe congressman that we got it and then not give it to us. So it's pretty much there, but I haven't heard it officially, just to be clear. But anyway, lots of support from a lot of different places and a lot of good information. And of course, we can learn by what worked at other lighthouses, and not just the lighthouses, but along the rest of the coast, what's worked in erosion protection. And there's been a lot of great, a lot of things that really work. Barnegat sits big time on the edge, and yet it's very protected. Cape May was, starting to lose ground big time, and yet they put those jetties in and the big beach, and it's doing well. So can be done.
It can be done. And would you say, I guess, sorry, Richard, one more question for Nancy. Yeah. Would you say there is more attention, right, with the nationally, internationally discussion on climate change? Do you think lighthouses in New Jersey are getting more attention to this, epidemic, if you will?
Because of the climate change?
Well, yes, and like your case, for the East Point Lighthouse, where erosion or potential storms will, affect that site. Do you think more attention has been given in the last few years, or is it still sort of like a slow trickling movement to kind of bring more awareness to it?
Yeah, I think the attention that we're given actually is, in that particular case, sadly, we're in what the DEP refers to as the retreat zone, meaning it's a worthless, like it's not going to, no matter what we do, it isn't going to work. So they have given up. And unfortunately, that's kind of why we can't get anywhere in one respect, from what I understand, my observation of the whole thing, because they've considered it a lost cause, that there's not, because of climate change, they say there's nothing that can be done. Well, I completely disagree. And I watch it along the rest of the coast. They continue to fight and hold back the water, and and if that didn't work, they try something else, but here along the Bayshore, they go, oh, nothing can be done, and we're just not going to do anything. And unfortunately, that has really worked against the lighthouse. So we get attention in a way, but they're using it to point the finger to, look, it's going, the rising sea level is going to take everything over. And they point to things like the East Point Lighthouse or anything along the Bayshore as a lost cause. And that's not a good way to have attention drawn to. That's not the kind of attention you want. You don't want anybody to give up on something, especially something so important. So
Thank you, Nancy. And one more question on behalf of Melissa. We're tag teaming. She is currently cooking dinner, but she would like to hear more. We'd all like to hear more. Something you mentioned and you touched upon interpretation and the dynamics of the interpretation at the site. You know, referencing like there are things that kids, teens, we can all get our hands on. So if you don't mind sharing a bit on the interpretation of the site and how you're engaging the public in that manner.
Well, first you can actually, one of the things that's really, it's hard at a lot of historic sites to have ADA access. And East Point, although obviously not the entire lighthouse because there's steps involved and we obviously couldn't put an elevator in, but the entire first floor is ADA accessible. That's the first big thing right there. That's 3 main rooms that are accessible. And as we bring people up the ADA ramp, which is built on the east side, and it takes you into the kitchen, which is a really neat, you first thing you see is this big wood burning, kitchen stove. Could have been coal as well, but it, a big old black wrought iron, neat stove. And then there's old kitchen utensils that anybody can pick up and touch. And we have people go in there, oh, my grandmother had one of these, things like that. But the kids can, mess with old I don't know what they're called, little whippers and, all kinds of kitchen gadgets. And there's a butter churn that they can turn and, and they can see things like the old washing machine there, the Ringer washing machine, which was all hand done from one bucket to another. And again, they're not, instead of the parents going in or grandparents saying, oh, don't touch that, don't touch that. They're actually encouraged to touch things, which is massive. So they go from that room into the dining room, and there's one of those stereoscopes that they can look at all kinds of pictures in. And in the living room, there's a potbelly stove, and in front of it sits a barrel with a checkerboard on top. And the shell, and it's instead of being checker pieces, they're actually made out of shells. And the kids can sit in little chairs, or adults can sit in little chairs and play checkers with one another, which is kind of fun. And again, experience the fact that, okay, back in the day, you didn't have, laptops or phones or, television, or the people sat and played checkers, or they read, or there's a guitar in the corner, and, there's different things that they can touch and play with. And of course, they haven't even made it to the children's room, which has all kinds of things that, that none of them involve batteries, which is pretty neat. So, and actually when they get in there, their cell phones, I think because of the double metal roof from the cupola to the actual lighthouse roof, your cell phones don't really even work. So they get disconnected whether they like it or not. They get kind of unplugged history. So, and all the way through the building, it's like that. And there's certain times, we don't do it all the time. I'd like to, but we the crew that's actually in the lighthouse itself dresses in period clothing. So you really get the look and feel that you've stepped back in time and you're visiting the keeper and his family. So it's really a window into the past that I think is pretty unique to that. You don't see it that often where people can really, of any level, we have some people with some learning challenges, and they can come in there and experience it as well. So does that cover it?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Richard, I know you said you had photos, so I am going to turn it over for everyone to ask questions. You can use the chat feature, or you can unmute yourself and ask. But I know, Richard, you want to share sort of your story with us on your work at the East Point Lighthouse as well.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. We had a few pictures of the before and afters. My background, if you see, is the flooded basement that we got to see when we first got there. It was a major issue for putting systems in the building, and we had to actually elevate most of those. And let me get into sharing my screen. It's disabled. Kelly, can you
I'm going to attempt to do that.
Okay. But Nancy, wasn't there a story also of the light catching fire?
Yes, and in between when the society first formed, the building was still relative, although in bad shape, it was still intact. But during the time when they were trying to convince the state of New Jersey to offer a management agreement, like I said, it was just left open to the kids would just go in, and it was kind of a party hangout place and really left to dilapidate. And in the course of that, there was hopefully accidental fire where someone had thrown a lit cigarette into the lantern room. The kids were sitting outside on the railing out there and I guess enjoying the view and smoking, and they threw a lit cigarette in, and it basically burned the entire lantern room and roof. So, and to the point where the cupola collapsed into the second floor. So that's how the building ended up with absolutely no roof or cupola, or actually the light had been removed by then. But yeah, it was in very, very bad shape. And then that was in 1971. And between 1971 and 72, the state of New Jersey left it open without even, attempting to cover the roof. So it was in very bad shape when the Historical Society first started their restoration.
This was before the last restoration. This is the stairs down to the basement. Shows you the condition of the plaster is up here. All this is lath and wood. It's all rotted here. It's gone. These are the foundation walls. Just give you a quick rundown of some of the things we saw. This is the condition of the rooms and the paint. There used to be a stove in here of some sort.
Yeah.
And just horrific conditions. This is a view you get from the light itself.
And visitors can actually get into the lantern room, which is pretty neat. So you can enter this room.
It's incredible.
More of a dining room, looking at the kitchen door there.
Yeah, with the brickwork was covered with plaster and all just decaying away.
And where's that? Oh, that's the kitchen. Gotcha.
The electric panel was in the closet.
That's where the right there where that hole is on the right where the brickwork is, where the cook stove is now. It looks great. Where it had been originally.
Pretty, huh? And that was the condition of the exterior of the building.
Yeah.
Versus today. And over here on the right, you can see that's the handicap ramp that they put in, so you can come right into the kitchen instead of dealing with these stairs.
Right.
And this is the mechanical equipment we had to hang from the floors because we couldn't put it on the floor because of the flooding.
Yep.
And that's one of the upstairs bedrooms.
That's it. And that bedroom set, we don't know for sure because you can't really document it the same way as real estate, but it's possible that beautiful oak bed and the dresser and washstand that go with it had been in the lighthouse with one of the keepers. It was donated by one of the descendants of the keeper, and it came through the right family line, and it's from the right time period. So it's pretty fun to think that actually could have been in there when a keeper and family lived there and belonged to the keeper.
Interesting rope bed history. I saw one recently that had a hinge on the side here. And you could actually
that one isn't actually a rope bed, but we do have a rope bed in the children's room.
And they had a rope bed that could fold up like a Murphy bed, but it's just freestanding.
Oh,
Never seen that before.
Yeah, we have a rope bed and a which I re-roped. I had someone show me how to do it, so it was pretty fun. And then someone came in. There was two sisters that came in, and they started giggling. They said, "Oh, we have something we have to give you." And they came back again, and they brought us a tightener, a rope that tightens the rope beds. So it sits over the rope bed. It's pretty neat.
But how'd you get my grandma's Afghan? I want to know. And so that's all I had. I just want to show you a quick. Then we'll take up the show.
No, well, thank you. Oh, wait, go back to that one. Can you go back to that one?
Yep.
That shows where the cupola fell into that floor there.
That's right, because it was burned, right?
Right.
I forgot that.
Yeah.
Right here, wasn't it?
Right there on the right side through the door there. You can see it looks like an oil spill, but it's actually charred. And you can see how we left the trim behind, right there. We left some of the trim with the charred marks just to let the building tell its story a little bit. So even under the bed, you can see little, looks like a little oil spots, but it's not. Those are little charred spots from the ambers falling into that level. Thank you.
Hello.
Back to that. Yep, there it is.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Nice, nice show and tell. Does anyone have questions for Nancy? Yes, Faith. Oh,
Yep.
Faith, you have to unmute. I tried to unmute you, but you have to do it on your.
I got it.
Oh, there you
I
go.
got it.
Thank you.
Okay.
There you go. Hi, Faith.
Hi. Nancy spoke at the New Jersey Lighthouse Society at our last, the last meeting or the one before. I'm involved with the New Jersey Lighthouse Society and have been for almost as long as I've lived in New Jersey, about 20 some odd years. And I know the one thing that Nancy mentioned, and I would say this to everyone, a letter writing campaign. And I think if there is some way, I know Nancy has to be careful about what she does. And so if we could make sure we have the information as to where to send letters to say how important this lighthouse is to the history of New Jersey, and whatever other types of verbiage we might need to use to make it a worthwhile letter. So if this is something that everybody could do, it would certainly put some pressure on. It's probably the only way that at this point what we can do, because until they say yes, you can do something, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the letters to the governor of New Jersey, letting him know that this is important to people. These historic sites matter, and that it even if it's in what's called the retreat zone, that we should try to save it. It's worked in the past, and if we can, I always believe that if we do what we can for as long as we can, then something, we'll learn to do it better as we go on. So to retreat from something before it's lost, to me, is, just unacceptable. But so basically let the governor of New Jersey, and that's where the power lies, apparently, from everything I've researched. It's the governor that sets appoints the commissioner of the DEP, and then the DEP commissioner sets the tone or the priorities of the DEP. So in my view, then if historic preservation or tourism sites or any of that are not important to the DEP, then they really should turn places like not just East Point, but others over to somebody who does care and that is their mission. If it's not their mission, that's fine. But then, give it to someone that it is. Don't just, make it impossible for us to maintain it and keep it safe. So letters to the governor is a big deal. And of course, letters to the commissioner. That's
unfortunately your comment about having the eastern coast of New Jersey lighthouses receive a lot more attention than you have gotten. That seems to be the norm with the other 2 or 3 small lighthouses that are still along that coast. And I'm an out-of-stater, and I got really involved when I first moved here and was fascinated with the history involved. And the first thing that I did 2 months after I moved here was do the New Jersey Lighthouse Challenge.
it's wonderful.
And it was like, I couldn't believe everything that there was. You always hear, oh, New Jersey's just, a crummy place to be. Well,
They're beautiful things.
yeah, lots of them. So, and if people know people that have been involved with the lighthouse, or if maybe you're a descendant of a former keeper, whether it's this lighthouse or any lighthouse, get them, if you know them, or if you can reach out to people. They don't have to be just New Jersey residents. They can be people from everywhere.
We get visitors from all over the country, and actually international visitors as well. And if you haven't been to East Point, it's very remote. There's really not a whole lot out there. We have a lot of marsh and it's beautiful. I mean, it's gorgeous part of the state, but it's, there's just not, it's very, very remote. So, and yet people come.
Yeah, I wish, no matter how much money we might have or be able to help, if the state says, no, we can't do it, our hands are tied.
Yeah.
That's the impression I have. Is that correct,
Yep.
Nancy?
It is pretty correct. Yep. Of course, money always helps because it helps us hang in there longer, but
Right, I understand that. But
saying that, but we need both. We need to have the public let our elected officials know how important this is, and they need to respond accordingly. Hopefully, because without, like you said, without permission, can't get anywhere. So.
And Melissa was so gracious to post 2 links in our chat for our governor's office and the DEP commissioner. So if anyone is interested in supporting Nancy's cause, I hope everyone will write a letter to both of their offices to support progress at the East Point Lighthouse. Is there any other questions? Or Nancy, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with us? Because we're just getting to the hour and we appreciate everyone's time here.
Well, I just really appreciate, you covering this, because that's, like I said, we kind of sit in this very remote area. And if it wasn't for things like this, nobody would know the struggles that we face. And of course, no one would know even the beauty that we have to offer and the history that we have to offer without this kind of exposure. So I really want to thank the 10 most endangered, the folks that work that out to bring that attention to these places. And also for you covering, taking this extra step for us. It's a big deal. People need to know. And if it's just us out here screaming, they don't hear us at all. So I really
in numbers.
It's so important to protect places like this. I see it in the children's eyes when they come, and reports of, mom contacted me. We do things specifically for children. I have a teaching background, so I'm always doing things with kids, or to encourage children to enjoy being out there. So we do things like the Easter Bunny at East Point, and of course they learn history while they're there as well. Well, just at the Easter Bunny event, there was a little boy, it couldn't have been any more than like 7, I would say. And he not only came to see the bunny, but he came in the room twice to see him, which was pretty fun. And the mother contacted me that night, and she said, you have to hear this story. As he was going to bed and she's tucking him in, he's doing nothing but talk about the day and being at East Point Lighthouse. And she said, the last thing he said before he went go to bed, he said, Mommy, I can't wait to go back to East Point Lighthouse again. And I'm thinking, this is it. This is why we do this kind of thing, because if we can have children be interested in a historic site and want to come back again, then we've done our job at the end of the day. So the next generation will rise up and take care of, the important historic structures, because they have this, they started from the time they were little to appreciate them and want to be there. So anyway, that's my big plug on East Point. So I thank you.
Better call that mother and tell her to write a letter.
I'm pretty sure she did, actually. But yeah, but I hear that, I go in shopping and, somebody says, oh, the kids love we give them junior lighthouse keeper certificates when they climb. And, oh my, we just hear this kind of stuff all the time. And that's just important to do. And I would be very sad if that site was no longer available for kids to come to, or adults, but, specifically kids, because they are the next generation that will care for history and also be our future. So.
Thank you, Nancy. And thanks to everyone who has joined us this evening. We're really excited that you came out. We have recorded this, so we'll be up on our Facebook, our website, and our YouTube channel. Our next program coming up will be in downtown Freehold for a tour, an architecture tour. we will also have more talks with our 10 most, and PNJ, Nancy, I will say publicly, we will write a letter on your behalf to keep that going to the governor's office and the commissioners, and then Richard referenced another senator. So we'd be happy to continue that support and continue, getting this information out to save the East Point Lighthouse. So thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Kelly, what's your website?
It's preservationnj.org, and I will also add it in the link, even though I'm sure Melissa is typing a lot faster than I am. And thanks to Melissa for setting this program up as well. We will have more talk.
Thank you, Melissa.
So definitely go to our website. We're sort of rebuilding it, so it's a bit new, but you will find a lot of information there on events and programs, membership, and we will be launching a full 10 most database, sort of looking back to where they were, where they started, to where they are now. So you will see more of the East Point Lighthouse for sure on our platforms.
And
Great,
Melissa,
great.
thank you, student, too.
Nope.
Is she here?
Absolutely. I'm so glad we did that project and he brought it to our attention. So we'll talk more soon. Have a great night, everybody.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.